Welcome to the Training Portal podcast, where we delve into the heart of growth and transformation, both personal and professional. I'm your host, Melissa Mostert, and every fortnight, I'll be sharing a meaningful conversation over coffee with industry leaders, innovators, and changemakers who are helping to shape the future of South Africa. In each episode, we'll uncover stories of passion and impact, stories that inspire and challenge us to think differently about development, innovation, and community upliftment. Whether you're dedicated to education, seeking personal growth, or driven by a desire to make a difference, this podcast is your companion on that journey to continuous development. The Training Portal podcast is your source of knowledge and insight, guiding you through the ever-evolving landscape of development in South Africa. Today, we are joined by Liebe Tredoux, an innovative e-learning course developer with an impressive background in education, information technology, and instructional design. She has a Bachelor of Commerce degree in industrial psychology and marketing management, a postgraduate certificate in education, and is currently completing a postgraduate diploma in sustainable development at Stellenbosch University. With extensive experience designing courses for institutions like UCT, Stellenbosch University, and Acorn Education, she has established herself as a leader in instructional design and in learning development. She's here to share insight into her career journey, the current state of online education in South Africa, and the future of instructional design. So, Liebe, tell us, how did you get into the field of instructional design?
So a few years ago, I volunteered at the Open Book Festival, and they collaborated with the Wikimedia Foundation, and there I got into coding. And I always thought, I'm kind of head in the clouds. I'm not made for that logical world.
What era?
Yeah. But then, once you get into it and you're like, ooh, I can figure out a solution and instantly see if it's working or not. Yes, I got very interested in that. And that's kind of how I realized, ooh, there's more to teaching, or, more than to the world that I thought I can do. So yeah, that's initially. And then I first started working at Valencia as a learning designer. And then after that, I went back into teaching a bit. And
But must have been an adjustment,
Yes. Well, so I now I do miss, walking a path with the students and, taking them on their learning journey and seeing them develop. So there is that element, but I mean, I can still do tutoring or something like that if I feel like I miss it. Yeah. But no, I think what's so exciting with learning design is just there's so many new things to learn and things to do. Yeah. And then, so from Valencia, I started doing some freelance work for UCT, for the commerce department, and for Stellenbosch University. And from there, just kind of, you build up a community or network. And I did some work for Ground Floor and Master Start. Yeah, so
like roots everywhere,
a little bit, yeah. And I mean, the people in learning design, I mean, you will know, they're amazing.
They really are.
Yeah, I've never had a bad experience with a learning designer, so I'm really grateful for that. And I've been so fortunate, I work hard, I'm dedicated, and and you take it from there. You learn new lessons and you implement that, and there you go. Yeah.
And tell me, so you've got quite a vast background, especially in things like industrial psychology and marketing. How has this influenced your approach to things like instructional design?
So I think even if we're looking at AI, we're still working with humans. And in that sense, what intrigued me about industrial psychology is, the fact that you get to learn how people think and how they work. And as a teacher, you also know, that's very important, trying to motivate a 13-year-old to be excited about your product.
And that's not easy.
That's very difficult. That's a hard sell. So yeah, I think in that sense, whether you're 40 years old or 15, you need to figure out what makes people tick. And then obviously from there, you have to figure out your marketing, how you're going to sell it to them and make it fun and enjoyable. So yeah, I think that plays a role.
Are there any career highlights that have stood out to you throughout your life? I mean, you've been a part of so many companies and taken so many different journeys. What is one of the highlights that stick out to you?
So something that I really enjoyed, and I think they were taking the right approach to learning, is Acorn Education. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I do know about
Yes, yeah. So I think they started at Apex High School, and the way they explained it to me, this was also now a few years ago, but basically all the gaps that we have in our traditional schooling system, they figure out ways of filling those gaps and, supporting the students and giving them what they need. And then obviously combining it with a hybrid learning model. So I think that was really exciting. And then what I also really found fascinating is I did a course about aquaponics. And for me, I mean, that was a learning curve for me. So that was a lot of fun, and I mean, I'm not a scientist. I don't know anything about that. But I think it makes you a better learning designer if you don't necessarily have all the inside information.
I agree. I mean, if you're willing to learn in the job, I feel it makes you a better learning designer.
Yes, because you're curious about how this works and you think about, okay, how the student looking at this, they might also not know about it. So how will they interpret this information?
And I think that's a skill that many teachers don't have. They just teach the content as the content. I think that's one of the reasons I enjoyed the transition between normal teacher to learning designer and instructional designer. So currently you are a freelance learning designer. What led you to this decision?
So the flexibility is a big thing, and obviously working remotely. I mean, I've gone into offices, where needed, and I've enjoyed that, obviously, the face-to-face time with people. But having that flexibility, if I need to go pick my dog up from doggy daycare or I need to take my son for his vaccinations or whatever, then, I have that flexibility. Whereas that's something that's difficult in a teaching environment. You have to be in that building from this time to that time. So that's I realized with my personality and preferences, that's very restricting. Yeah, so that's a big factor.
That was a big factor.
Yes.
I know it was a big factor for me too. Because I mean, like you said, it's very restrictive in the classroom setting. You're forced to teach a certain way. You can't take like your own initiative and do things differently. Because I mean, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yes, we need to have another podcast.
Exactly. So if you look back on your career now, is there anything that you think you would do differently?
I've thought about this. And even, I didn't want to go study BCom. I wanted to go study art or languages or archaeology. I mean, there's still time. But
I'm young,
Never too old. But so obviously that led me on a certain journey, and it opened certain doors for me, and it allowed me, I mean, with the experience that I had, I was able to go teach economics in China, which was an incredible experience. So no regrets.
That's good. I think about that question for myself as well. And I mean, if you regret something, then you wouldn't be where you are today.
Exactly. Then our experience
change.
Yeah, you never know what would have happened.
Exactly. So tell me, you have worked at quite a few prestigious places. I mean, you've mentioned Valentia, you mentioned Acorn and Apex High School. Those are some big projects that have happened. How did these experiences help shape your approach to instructional design?
So at Valentia, I started working there in October, and they were launching in January. So we were in the deep end there. But it's always funny to me when I see a job, a vacancy, and they say you need like 5 years of experience or something. Because within learning design, like 1 year at certain places is like equal to
5 years.
Yes, you're learning so many new things. And what I really enjoyed there, I can't remember who organized these, but we had these weekly workshops to make sure everyone was on the same page, and we kind of understood, our approach to learning and how we were setting up the online learning model there. So that was really great. But definitely, it teaches you different skills. At almost every different place that I've worked for, they use a different LMS or a different authoring tool. And then, most people use Rise, obviously, but that's a different story. But and I mean, I love playing around with H5P models and seeing, will this work with the content? Like, how are we going to do this? But obviously it depends on who the learners are, what the goal of the course is, and all of that.
Now, we spoke briefly about why you enjoy being a freelancer, because I mean, it gives you more of a work-life balance. But how do you avoid things like burnout? I mean, I struggle with it, but I work a 9-to-5 job. So as a freelancer, how do you manage that? I mean, obviously your time is your own, but still.
Yeah, you have to be cognizant of that. So I'll just quickly tell you a little story. So my husband, before we were dating, he came to visit me in China in 2018. And soon after that, we realized, okay, this is the thing. And I asked him, okay, what was the first thing that you found interesting about me that you didn't know before? And he said he didn't know that I liked Excel spreadsheets so much, which is, my dad is an actuary, so obviously I get that from him, and my mom is highly organized. So I enjoy planning things out. I mean, I'm working on a project now where I started a bit late with the project. It's a situation out of my control, but it's fine. So I'm working hard now to catch up. But usually I try to work ahead of schedule and try to get things done before the due date, so that I don't like that pressure. I know some people thrive on it, but I can't.
I'm
like that.
one of those who thrive on the pressure. Give me the deadlines. Make the deadline a week from
respect.
now.
I don't know. Like I get lethargic. I'm like, how do we do this? Paralyzed. Yeah, that's the word. But yeah, so I enjoy planning things out and making sure I've got my planning and sorting that out.
So places like Valentia and Apex, they focus a lot on online learning. And I know since COVID-19, this has really taken off. What is your opinion of the current state of online learning in South Africa?
I think so. It depends which organization we're talking about, obviously. So obviously you still get some people who are very averse to it, and I understand that, rightly so. But I think we shouldn't be afraid that AI is going to take our jobs. We're always going to need that human input in one way or another. But then, don't be afraid, but also don't rely too much on the technology. We need to make sure that we see it as a tool that we can use to enhance certain experiences.
Exactly.
Because, if you're talking about VR or all these fancy tech things, some people cannot handle, putting that equipment on. It's.
I dislike the headset.
I once played like a zombie game with it, and then I could feel the zombies attack me from behind. It freaked me out. I'm not made for that. Yeah. So, but obviously, I think the ideal is if you can create the didactic information, create that in an online platform, and obviously make it interactive and engaging, so that students want to engage with it, but then have the human contact and have that human connection, and reflect on it and see, obviously, if it's people are in different parts of the world, have a discussion forum or things like that. But figure out a way that works best for the students and the organization, and merging that.
I agree there. I don't think online is ever going to replace face-to-face. I think when it comes to things like training and education, you're always going to need some sort of human element to it. So an AI, I know a lot of learning designers that I've spoken to were terrified of AI because, like you said, they're not using it as a tool. They're worried it's going to take their job. And I can understand the fear, but education training's always had a human element.
Yeah.
So it's always going to have a human element.
Yeah. And if we think of our favorite subject when we were in high school, it's probably the subject where you had the best relationship with that teacher. Maybe not always, but usually. Yeah, so that's also something that we need to keep in mind. And then if we're talking about AI, I finished my PG dip in sustainable development last year at Stellenbosch University, and it was amazing. Highly recommend that course. But we need to look at the sustainability also of AI. Even, some parts of my job require me to use it. And then I'm always thinking, how much water is this using? How much energy is this using? How efficient is this, So we need to figure out a way of, without destroying a whole desert ecosystem with solar panels, figure out how can we make this sustainable,
model. So with the limited internet in South Africa, do you see solutions like Starlink as the answer to bring, bridging that digital divide?
So I think in South Africa, we've got such a unique situation, you've also taught before, students who come into the classroom and, even if they're at home or wherever they are for their learning experience, maybe they're not fed, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy, their basic foundational needs haven't been met yet. Yeah. So I think obviously it's amazing the resources going into that. But before, we need to be realistic. If I'm hungry, if I didn't get enough sleep, if I'm stressed about my home situation or worried about my brother or sister or mom, I'm going to struggle to focus on what the teacher is trying to teach me, whoever they are. Yeah. But actually, Wikimedia, and I know a lot of people say, oh, you can type anything on there. But try doing that. Those people are strict. They will take you out. They're like, this is not okay.
They will change it so fast.
Yeah. And you will get reprimanded. Anyway, so they actually have this device where it downloads the information that you want. And I mean, some of the Wikimedia articles, like if you go and look, there's people who are passionate about trains, and they've done so many articles about that they did their research properly. But then you can take this device and plug it in wherever in a rural environment, and that information is accessible for the students there. Yes, I think something like that might be, instead of giving them iPads and then you need the infrastructure for the internet, like maybe let's see if we can get something like that connected to a projector, put it on the screen for everyone to have access to. Maybe those are more realistic solutions within the South African context.
I think so too. I mean, I think internet can be so easily misused.
That's the problem.
Not just used for it. I mean, yes, the goal might be let's just use it for education. But I mean, we know people won't just use it for education.
I mean, certain devices you can limit certain things, surely, but I mean,
it doesn't filter everything.
No, it doesn't. And then it becomes more of a distraction instead of actually a learning tool. And then, what was the point?
Exactly.
So we need to be realistic about that.
Before we continue with the rest of the interview, here's a quick look at how Training Portal empowers individuals and businesses through skills development. At Training Portal, we are proud to be a leader in skills development consulting and a multi-accredited training academy, committed to solving your unique challenges through innovative and cost-effective solutions. Whether you are looking to enhance your team's skills, comply with industry regulations, or maximize your BEE scores, our extensive range of over 300 short courses and more than 30 fully accredited qualifications cover all your needs. From agriculture to information technology, our CETA and QCTO accredited qualifications are designed to provide comprehensive learning experiences. We tailor our training programs to fit your specific requirements, ensuring maximum benefits within your available resources. Our innovative learning platform allows for flexible, self-paced study, available both on-site at your premises and through our Training Portal campuses all across South Africa. With Training Portal, you achieve more than your training outcomes. You gain a partner who stands by you from the initial consultation through to the continuous management of your training program. Now let's get back into the episode.
So how would institutions like Training Portal, how can we better prepare for the future of online education?
So I think we need to speak to students more, find out what do they enjoy, what works for them, what doesn't work. And I mean, especially in your situation, you work with students who have disabilities, that's such a core, I don't want to say market, but the people, if you can accommodate them, then you can reach almost anyone. Yeah, so I think in that sense, chatting to our students and don't just give them a form where they say yes or no, or like and I know obviously if you're scaling and you've got thousands, millions of students, that's hectic. But give them an opportunity to really explain. And this is what they actually did in my PG Dep. For every course they wanted little essays about how was your experience.
How were they doing?
And they actually read through what we said, because then I was highly impressed. So for the next course, I took it to heart, and then we could see the changes being implemented.
That's amazing, because very few institutions do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it's sometimes difficult, especially for big institutions, to utilize something like that. I think that's a good point, is listening to what the students' needs are.
Yeah. And I mean, even chatting to students face to face, that could work, or giving them a poll, or saying to them, here's a Google form link, whatever, tell us what you think. share.
Now, how do you balance your creativity with structure, especially with designing online content?
So I think this was what was a lot of fun for me with the aquaponics course, because I played around so much with H5P tools, and they, just going wild, and they let me do my thing. That was awesome. But obviously some places. So for example, some people don't want to work with gamification. They want to look more at storytelling. So yes, I've always wanted to be an art teacher. I think that's the dream job. But so I definitely have my creative side, and I think in our industry there's so much space to play around with that. And I mean, even if I look at coding, sometimes I'll tell my husband, I'm struggling with this. You talk to each other about your day. And then the other day, he spent almost 2 hours writing code for me to bypass a few steps to make my job go quicker. I'm like, yes. So even that, people think creativity, art, things like that, that's all it's applied to. But it's, you can be creative in coding or the way that you analyze the
different mediums
data.
of it.
Yes.
That's awesome. Now, I know as an instructional designer that we all have our favorite methodologies and technologies and tools that we swear by. What are your favorites?
So I don't know if you'll agree with this, but so when I first was interested in going into learning design, my husband organized for me he worked for Sanlam Indie, and they had a learning team, and he organized for me to meet with their lead. And I did some research and stuff for them, and I mean, she's amazing. And she first kind of gave me that shock. She said, the different learning styles, it doesn't exist. I was like, what?
This is what we've been trained for.
Yeah, as a teacher and in learning design, that's what but we all learn better if we've got words and sound and movement. It's just, you remember it better. So obviously we think, I'm more a visual person. I'm more auditory. But so that for me, and then obviously, taking it with a pinch of salt. If you look at Addy or, all the other models that we have, looking at it and saying, okay, for this project, I'm currently working on a project where they're kind of throwing all of that out the window. Yeah, they're not even doing storyboarding. They're like, we're going to
just build.
Yeah, just build, go for it. I mean, also it's on a tight timeline, but I think in learning design, and it's funny because I'm actually now struggling a little bit to get into this new project, because you have to rethink how you do things and make a kind of adjustment there. So yeah, I think it's important to challenge what we're told and to just question, is this actually going to work for the students? Is this model appropriate? And then maybe taking a bit from here and there, and then piecing together, piecing together a new thing.
I mean, yeah, every company is different. I know Training Portal's got their own, I'm not allowed to tell you what it is, their own ways of doing things. And that was it was an adjustment in itself. So I can understand how you've worked for multiple companies where I've only worked for Training Portal. So to adjust your mindset to each one must be a task in itself.
Yeah, I think my mind and personality is made for that, though. Yeah.
I don't think mine would be.
No, but that's why it's perfect for you.
Yeah. Are there any trends in online learning methodologies globally that are interesting you at the moment?
So I think what we might see more of is micro learning and even nano learning. Having learning available just in time. Like, I need to do this task now. Okay, give me the information I need to do this, because I'm sure you've also experienced this. You can get overloaded with information, and then you think, okay, I'll read this later when I get to it. But then when you get to that step, you forget. You're still overloaded. So I think that's something that we can maybe look at. And especially once again, within the South African environment, everyone is going on about tech, but we still have people who can work with their hands. Like, that's their natural talent, and we shouldn't disregard it because we're moving into this tech revolution. But so I think if you look at a mechanic or maybe carpenter, okay, they've done this joinery. Okay, how are they going to do the next step of it? Or, so figuring out how to meet the needs of our students at the level where they are. Yeah.
I get that. Okay, so we've spoken a little bit about AI already. I mean, we have briefly touched on this topic, but I do want to hear a little more of your thoughts on how AI is going to impact the field of instructional design, not just, let's say, today or tomorrow, but in the next 5 years.
Yeah, so I read this thing where they said, I don't want AI to do my creative writing. I want it to do my laundry and my dishes.
One can hope.
Sure, that would be so nice. So I think it's important. My sister-in-law the other day said, think about why you're using it. Like, are we just becoming lazy, right? So obviously, a while ago, I had an idea for a team building exercise where you go into physical public spaces, but I didn't know that area where the offices were. So I asked AI, like, use public spaces and create a scavenger hunt that's based on whatever the topic was, and let's go. And that was really cool. And obviously, I think another thing that we need to remember, don't just copy and paste.
Always proofread and make sure that it is relevant.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter how many times I say use the Oxford comma or don't use it. AI has its own mind. And say please and thank you.
Always. Thank the robot.
Yeah, so I think it will definitely more and more have an impact. And I think employees might be pushing, because that's what we're seeing in some organizations, employees pushing for sustainable practices within their work. So employees might start to push for sustainable, AI models, figuring out how to use less resources or how to use renewable resources instead of it further wrecking the environment. But I think that's the important thing. Use it maybe when you're stuck, or if you're struggling to think of a specific idea or word, but don't just use it to replace your thoughts.
No, I agree there. I mean, it's not, like we said, it's not meant to replace the human element of it. But now I'm quite interested. I know I said that a couple of times, but I mean, it's rare for me to be able to speak to another instructional designer like this.
Go for it.
Now, you take part in quite a lot of projects, sometimes multiple projects at the same time, if you have the time and capacity. How do you measure the success of the impact of the e-learning courses that you create?
So sadly, that's sometimes the part of the process that I'm not involved in, unfortunately. Sometimes Acorn, for example, they sent us the statistics of like, okay, these are the results. This is not per student, but just like, this is the average. This is what it's looking like. So for some projects, I can see the impact, which is great. Obviously, you want to see that. Yeah. And another project I worked on, it was great, where the students, we created the survey form afterwards, and we had to process that data for the client. So you could actually see, I mean, obviously you'll always get someone who's negative, and doesn't matter what you do, it will never be good enough. So there was one such person out of hundreds of students. But, the rest, it was really great to see them saying, oh, they've learned things that they've never knew about, or, oh, they're going to rethink how they approach their work now. I think so. That's really great. But I mean, obviously, if you're getting to know your students and walking the path with them, that's a whole different level altogether.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I kind of miss about teaching.
Yes.
Is knowing exactly what, like, you've done all this work, what the result is at the end.
Yeah.
And I think it's very difficult for instructional designers to, like, especially ones who have come out of any sort of education background, to like give that control.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think it's important that we do figure out how to get qualitative but also quantitative data out of that, and to analyze it.
Have you got any advice for any of our listeners who happen to be interested in instructional design, how they can go about looking into becoming one, or just looking into the field in general?
Yeah, so I find in South Africa, there's not maybe a lot of people who necessarily are open about I don't know, in South Africa, people, my precious, they don't want to share.
No.
It's terrible. But so obviously you've got your Devlin Peck from America, Tim Slade from America. There's Heidi, I can't remember her surname now. But if you just Google, e-learning, is it in the e-learning industry, or, I mean, just start doing research and then listen to podcasts. There's books to read. The lady who wrote, she she designed the gamification, or she was part of the team designing the gamification for The Sims. Like she wrote a book. I think her name is Kim. Sorry, the names are escaping me now. But yeah, there's a lot of valuable resources available out there. Once again, in South Africa, we don't have so much access to the e-learning books necessarily. So, I mean, you can access those online. But, I mean, and like, chat to Mel, chat to me.
Yeah.
Like, reach out on LinkedIn.
Exactly. I was about to say LinkedIn I found is maybe one of the best resources to link up with any instructional designers. I mean, I've had multiple people who are wanting to get into the field who, for example, have seen the podcast or seen like an article or something that I'm a part of. And they reach out and they want to just know, like, how do we do it? And I mean, most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time, an instructional designer is more than happy to like share how they got there, or you know what they did, or what advice they've got. Especially, and I might be biased because you know, I came from a teaching background, but I feel like a lot of teachers want to do it, but they don't. They're afraid to take, because it's very different to teaching.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. Don't think if you're just a teacher you can make the jump. It is quite a mind shift.
Yes, but in the same sense, don't think because you're a teacher you cannot.
But you can't.
But it's just you have to make that mind shift. Oh, are you part of the EdTech Collective? I need to invite you. There's also a group, the EdTech Collective. There's a group on LinkedIn. They've got a website. Yeah, we did a few social events last year, and that was great. Every time other people joined, and we had one on. It's so funny. Cape Townians don't want to go out in the winter. I mean, I'm guilty of that. I want to stay home and cozy. So we actually had an online one, which is great. And then you meet so many different people and be part of the EdTech community, EdTech Collective. And then you figure out, once again on LinkedIn, there's micro-learning courses or conferences and things like that. So yeah, and I know when you're a teacher, your time is tight, you're overworked, you're stressed out, there's so much on your plate already. So maybe wait until the holiday after you've had a bit of a rest to jump into that. But yeah, I know it's hectic, but if you have the will.
I think so. And if you're willing and you're wanting to make that change, you shouldn't be afraid to take the chance. I mean, it's can be daunting because it's change. I mean, no one likes change, but I'm so grateful that I ended up where I am today.
Yes,
you know, and I know a lot of people are like, but you're not making as big of a difference as you were with, but we are. We're making huge differences. It might not be where we were, but
and you're maybe not getting a personalized letter. Oh my goodness, a while ago, one of my students from almost 10 years ago sent me a WhatsApp message. And I just cried. and I mean, they remember your words and you don't remember saying it, but it's stuck with them and it's carried them through difficult times, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So obviously we don't get that necessarily, but you are definitely making a positive difference.
I agree. Okay, so finally, tell me, where do you see the role of instructional design going and evolving over the next few years?
So I also think, you know, there's so many people, instructional design, learning experience designer, learning architect.
They're all synonymous with the same ideas.
Yes. I mean, obviously 10, 20 years ago, if you were an instructional designer, maybe you did training within a corporate company. But I mean, we've moved so far past that. And I think the lines are getting blurred a lot. But yeah, I think going forward in instructional design, I feel like there's a push to kind of go back. You know, you get some groups of teenagers who are refusing to use technology, which obviously good for their brain, wonderful. Yes, I think we're going to see some trends coming up that might not be where we think it would have gone, if that makes sense. So then once again, preparing for that and figuring out, okay, so how can I design something for you that will meet your need where you are? And I think we need to start thinking outside of just tech. You know, think of how can we design something hybrid that's accommodating more people. So for example, the course that I did, for every module, you had to be in person at the university on campus. So that as as amazing as it was, obviously, like you're connecting with people and that was holistic learning on a different level. That was really, really great. But obviously, if they made an online version of that, it would be able to reach a wider audience. Yeah. So, and I understand, the lecturers, they've got their way of seeing things and doing things, and they've got their preferences. So, and that's perfectly understandable. But yeah, we maybe need to figure out ways to be more adaptable and more flexible, even though we are. I mean, as a learning designer, that's what you do. Okay, let's see how we can figure out how to wangle this to meet the needs. But yeah, I think the big thing is being open to learning and being adaptable and figuring out different ways of preparing yourself for the next thing. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. I know you said you're busy with a project at the moment, so the fact that you were able to come and sit with us and chat with us today, that's amazing. I absolutely loved talking to you. I'm sure we'll bring you on again. And thank you.
Thank you, Mal. It was lovely chatting with you.
It was lovely chatting to you.
Next time on the Training Portal podcast.
Journey in your own story. I think for me, another defining moment was that week leading up to the first test, or weeks rather, lots of team building exercises. And one particular activity we did was where Jake White was the coach at the time, and he went through and he said, can we just reflect on our journey to get to this place? And what was your why, your defining moment? And most of the guys, stood up and they spoke about their childhood heroes. Some of the guys in the team, they spoke about just how they were exposed to while playing provincial teams, junior teams. And I got up and I spoke and I said, I don't have those stories. I never grew up with rugby at home. I literally just, as I mentioned early on, just stumbled upon the sport, and I don't have anything to offer the team. But also what I do have to offer is that my why is that I recognize that being in this team and representing not just myself as an individual, but also my family, my community, that is now my why.